Welcome to this episode of the Lifeguard Project Podcast, where I interview Newport Beach Lifeguard John Carpenter. John started as a YEP, or Youth Employment Program, in 1969 and has served with the Newport Beach Lifeguard Service for 50 years, from 1970 to 2020. During his time, he had certain accolades like training instructor for the Rookie Training Academy, Lifeguard of the Year in 1985, Cadet Program Coordinator, All-American Swimmer at Costa Mesa High School in 1971, Orange Coast College National Champion in Water Polo in 1972, and has been a biology teacher for 40 years, as well as a water polo and swim coach at Estancia High School. John and I get into some really interesting facts about the inception of the lifeguard service in Newport Beach when I watched him do his centennial presentation of the 100-year anniversary of the Newport Beach Lifeguards. John and I go through the entire history as well as some of his own personal stories. I hope you enjoy this episode. And thanks as always for listening. Cool. Well, John, I just want to start off by saying the reason I wanted to bring you in here just selfishly was because of watching the centennial presentation that you did for the Newport Beach Lifeguards. It was just so cool. And I think our profession as a whole is we have a rich history that's very hard to document because it exists in so many different ways through so many different people's basements with photos and old stories and all these things.
Yes.
And as a young lifeguard myself, a lot of the inspiration that I gathered that's gotten me to this point to be doing a project about lifeguarding and everything came from hearing those stories, learning about that history, seeing the old photos, and if we don't talk about it and document, especially nowadays with so many distractions and things, and the photos get missed or not, shown or whatever, the younger generations will forget about it. And I don't want to see that happening. So I just think there's an immense value to guys like yourself who have been around and seen so much of the history, and you've taken that extra step to try to make something out of it and collect some of that stuff. So, first of all, thanks for spending the time to do that with us and for everyone that's listening. Let's start off with just a quick intro about yourself, where you grew up, and how you even got started into lifeguarding.
Well, Gasco, thank you for having me on your program. And thank you for doing the Lifeguard Project, because I think it's absolutely wonderful and can only help.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I grew up in Alhambra, California, till I was 8. We moved to Texas, where I lived for 2 years, and my dad got a chance to get relocated in Southern California. If we'd stayed in Texas, I don't know what I would have been doing, but not lifeguarding, ocean lifeguarding. So we moved here. I joined the swim and water polo teams as a freshman at Costa Mesa High School. And it was there as a 15-year-old that I was in aquatics. My mother was a scout leader. I was the den chief as a Boy Scout. I was a Boy Scout. And she decided to take a tour of the Newport Beach Lifeguard Department. And I was there too with the kids. And she noticed they had this YEP program, YEP, Youth Employment Service, and talked about training to be lifeguards. And she said, well, my son, could he be one of those YEPs? And they said, oh, I'm sorry. It's only open to residents in Newport Beach. They pay taxes and support the program. And she goes, well, my husband and I are part owners of a boatyard in Newport Beach. We pay taxes to the city. And it kind of took them back, and they said, oh, well, okay, I guess he can try out. So
how old were you at this point?
I was 15.
15. Before that, had you had lifeguarding or anything on your radar at all, or knowledge?
The only radar was because at Costa Mesa High School, there were a couple guys ahead of me that were lifeguards, but it never struck me as, I want to be one of them.
Oh, okay.
I did see them at the beach because I would go down there and body surf. We'd always take a little water wonder from the pool and told the coach, hey, we're going to go down there and do a kicking workout and go surfing, body surfing, because you could dominate the wave over the swimmers.
Yeah.
So we would go down quite often. So when I saw them and I'd talk to them, but it never struck me as that's what I wanted to do. Not yet. So then with the YEP program, I tried out. Actually, now that I think of it, I was 14. I was 14 the first time I tried out, and the water was pretty cold that day. Surf was probably running about 4 to 5 feet, which was no big deal. Could do that. I got down to the Newport Pier, a 1,000-yard swim, 15th Street to the Newport Pier. I was so hypothermic that I couldn't see straight. My body just stopped working. It's like a marathon runner at mile 22. It just shuts down. You want to push through and you couldn't. Luckily, the rescue boat was right there watching people make the turn at the Newport Beach Pier buoy and head in to finish. And they go, "That's it. Just hit the shore and you're done." I go, "I can't. I just can't. My arms won't go anymore." "Well, if we put you on the boat, you're done for the day. You're out." I said, "Okay, I have to." So they put me on the boat, brought me over to the pier, and they said, "Just walk in to the base of the pier there and check back in and tell them, you're done." Well, I walked to the base of the pier and I kept going straight right into Charlie's Chili. I was so cold, I didn't know where I was going. And I walked in there dripping wet, and the waitress looked at me and goes, "What can I help you with?" "I'm so cold." And she goes, "Well, go sit right behind the ice machine there because there's hot air blowing out the back." Yeah. So I sat behind there. She put a towel over me. She brought me a cup of hot cocoa. And I sat there for about 20 minutes and warmed up and got rid of the hypothermia. Went back to the headquarters, and I kind of got a finger waggle like, "Where have you been?" Like,
they're looking for you.
We knew we put you on the pier, but we didn't know where you went. So they were a little worried. I was humiliated. I was humbled. It was like, oh my gosh. And this is something my mother got me into as a special thing. They didn't let Costa Mesa kids do this.
Yeah,
it's like,
okay.
I let myself down, my mom down, the Boy Scouts down. I said, "Oh, this was bad." So I decided at that point, as my mom was driving me home, I said, "I'm making this next year, period. No questions. I'm making it. Nothing was going to stop me." And I think that kind of attitude really pushed me and helped me. I did every workout as hard as I could. I ran. I lifted weights as hard as I could. I did everything I could. And the following year, I tried out and I made it. It was no problem. I mean, it was just easy. I was going to make it. And then I said to myself, a lot of people might have still remembered or known me from that first year of not making it. I said, I'm going to have to take that a step further. I need to prove to these people that Costa Mesa kids, Estancia and Costa Mesa. By the way, the following year, they opened it up to Newport Mesa. It was Newport Harbor, Corona del Mar, Estancia, and Costa Mesa. So I got that opened up to other Costa Mesa and Estancia kids. And I said to myself, well, at the end of the summer, Ed Newland has us do the Super Ironman, which is a 10-mile run and about a 1.5 mile swim. I'm going to win it. I'm going to win it. And that was my goal all summer. I did everything. We had lifeguard training, but of course he worked us out. Ed Newland, if you know him, was a taskmaster, and he taught us lifeguarding, but he also worked us crazy. We had to swim 3 times to 15th Street every morning from the Newport Pier, run to the 15th Street, swim back 3 times. That's just our warm up for the day. Okay. And sure enough, that final day came, and I said, okay, this is it. This is when you do it. Well, there was one other guy that was pushing me the whole way, and we got down to 6th Street, and the sand was so soft, really soft. And I noticed that if I ran behind him, I could run in his tracks, and I would conserve energy. So we went all the way down to the wedge. We got back to the bow pier, did that swim, got to the Newport Pier. Well, the Newport Pier, he was a better swimmer, and he got out of the water, and I was just rounding the buoy. So I got into the beach, and it was like, okay, now what are you going to do? Well, I remember from cross country talking to people, they said, you can't burst speed and catch someone. You slowly reel them in. And I put in my head, reel them in. Just take a little bit, pick it up a little bit, pick it up. Well, I got down to 56th Street. There's a little less than a mile left. And I caught him because I just slowly reeled him in. And I was tired. And I thought, okay, here's where I have to pass him. So I passed him. Well, he caught me. Now we're down to the last 300-400 yards. And I said, you didn't make it last year. Now's where you got to reach back. And I don't know where. I found another gear. It just happened. And my adrenaline and I won the race after 1 hour and 55 minutes by 3 seconds. And it was all redeemed. And the final redemption on that came the following week. I was at UC Irvine getting ready to jump in the pool to play a summer league water polo game. And one of the kids in the pool was a Corona del Mar player. He looked up and he goes, oh, that's Carpenter. He won the Super Ironman. Done. Redeemed.
Nice. Thanks for making it this far into the podcast. I just want to remind you guys as you're listening that the Ben Carlson Memorial Paddle is coming up, and it is a fundraising event. This year specifically, I've made a challenge through the Lifeguard Project for lifeguards to donate just $5 through the Lifeguard Project on the Mighty Cause website. You'll have the link below in the episode, and if you click, I just want to see how many lifeguards we can get to donate $5, basically the equivalent of a morning coffee, and see how much we can raise. So whether you're a lifeguard in Australia, New Zealand, the US, East Coast, West Coast, the goal is that you look at this link, send it to another lifeguard, and encourage them to donate $5. So please and thank you, check the link, donate $5, send it to another lifeguard, and let's see how much money we can raise together by just dropping in $5. And thank you so much. Well, and you know what's funny over talking to and interviewing a lot of lifeguards, a lot of the initial stories seem to be similar to yours. Some kind of, let's call it a rough around the edges entrance or an accidental finding of the profession, or, oh man, that was totally embarrassing. And then I had to redeem myself for the people who end up sticking through for such a long time. And I think that's a pattern that I've been noticing. But it's also, I like how you're approaching that kind of set your tone for this mindset of when you went in, you're like, okay, I'm going to do it 100%. So nice. And then the YEPS program, which since kind of went away, you were telling me your daughter ended up being you were one of the first that got in that was not living in Newport at the time,
Correct.
which was the rule.
Correct.
And then she was one of the last. So can you just close the YEPS thing out with that?
Right. So I went through my YEP year, and that was 1969. YEPS went until 1995, and then it became cadets.
Mm-hmm.
Which was YEPS, but cadets were a little more under the fire. We had merged with the fire department, so for years I was running the cadets, and it was the lifeguard training program. Mm-hmm. That's what it was. Even more so, you will follow exactly the curriculum the lifeguards do.
Yeah.
So these 15-year-olds, when they become 16, they're going to have it dialed in.
Yeah, and it's like an internship, right?
An internship, exactly
your
what
year
it was.
before you're eligible to apply.
Correct.
Which I think is so important because you
really
can't
is.
teach lifeguard skills in a basic lifeguard academy. There's just not enough time in the world. You need that time in the tower, that time watching the water, that time with people telling you their stories of how they process things. So I think it's super cool that Newport even had that as a option. Prior
to cadets, which I think started in 96, from 94, 95, 96, when I took over, the YEPs actually went into towers at the end of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
The top 3 or 4 where they needed some gaps filled, and they were probably bay towers or low-key towers. They weren't going to put them at 56th Street.
Sure.
But they could fill in because they had enough lifeguarding skills and they were good enough attitude-wise. I said, I trust that person, put them in the tower.
Yeah.
And it worked out great. It helped everybody, but that was more experience.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward to 2010, and they said, this is going to be the last year of cadets. We're just, the fire department's looking to trim. Do we really have to have cadets to run to lifeguard department? Well, not really. It's a great feeder program, and everyone wanted to keep it. But they said, no, we can probably do without it.
Mm-hmm.
Those kids can just go into the junior guard program A's. Okay, well, there's a place for them to go, so that's okay. So to get in, you had to be top 20. And my daughter, Kylie, was finished, I think, 22nd on the first 1,000-yard swim and then the run, swim, run. She knew she had to get in top 20. So she did the math, and she goes, I got to finish 18th. 18 and 22 is 40, divided by 2, I'll get in. And sure enough, she's coming down the home stretch. I see 2 bodies coming down the beach. Of course, I'm her dad, but I can't say a darn word because I run the program. And they're sprinting down. And sure enough, the last minute, she passes the girl and she finishes 18th. She gets last one in the program. The program went away after that. So that was pretty cool to kind of bookend that.
Yeah, absolutely. And did she go on to lifeguard as well?
No, she didn't. Both my daughters, Taylor and Kylie, did D's all the way through A's. So they both went the junior guard program for 7 years. Mm-hmm. And then Kylie went the extra year and became a cadet. Cool. But neither one of them decided that that's what they really wanted to do is become lifeguards.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Well, so let's get into the meat and potatoes here of take me through, you've been doing a lot of research and studying on the Newport Beach lifeguard history, besides also living it yourself over the years.
Yes.
But let's start with just the very beginning. We'll you're going to have your own stories throughout that time too. What was the very first inception and the first moments that started like an organized lifeguard situation or any initial water safety stuff in that Newport area? How did that all get started? Because I think it has a pretty cool inception story, right?
As far as me being in aquatics?
No, the Newport Beach lifeguards in general.
Oh, the inception.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you want to go back, prior to 1913, there was nothing organized at all, nothing. And there's no research, I've looked, and there's just nothing. In 1913, Dr. Frost, doctor at the time, was called to a rescue and a drowning. They pulled them out. They tried to resuscitate. They tried to do whatever they could, and they lost him. Well, it was his wife and son. He was called to their call, and they passed. So he, traumatized by that, of course, as you would be. He started the Frost Life-Saving Corps.
And he was just a local, like he was living in the area.
Doctor lived in the area.
Local doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So people said, well, call the doctor. We don't have anyone else, basically.
Correct.
Right.
There was nobody else to call. So he started the Frost Life-Saving Corps. He bought a pulmotor, which was a very crude resuscitation device that could get oxygen to a person. And he donated it to the city, the fire department as it was. He also bought some cork ring buoys, and he'd station them at places along the beach in areas where people frequented the water. There was really no one to use them, but, someone could go, oh, they're drowning, and take this ring buoy and at least throw it to them. There was something there, potentially maybe swim it out to him or kick it out to him. No real research on that, but there was something. There was some flotation device that he made. And that kind of took us through to about 1920, and that's where Tony Duriaga showed up, and he started forming the Balboa Life-Saving Corps with some of these guys, and he started training them. But there weren't very many skilled swimmers back then, so he really didn't have a whole lot to work with. And
this was a time when people were still just taking lines and walking out in the surf and barely going in their clothes and stuff, right? Like this was a really unique time for just humans interacting with the ocean in general and understanding it. It was.
They did. They anchored a line on the beach, and they ran it out to a buoy with an weight, and they literally hand over hand. Now, the clothing at the time was full dress, and my wife goes on to tell me, she says, women would sew weights into the bottom of their skirt so it wouldn't fly up. She goes, they basically were wearing something that was going to drown them and sink them. So they held onto these ropes, and imagine slippery ropes with surf, and some of them were so crowded, there was tons of people on them.
And you're wearing weights.
And you're wearing weights.
And a soaked garb.
Yeah, everyone was it was just a recipe for disaster, really. But they had the rope to hold on to, and, I'm sure most of them didn't go out past where they could touch, but so they did do that. And then in 1923, Tony Duraga, he lobbied the city council of Newport Beach and said, we need to start a real department. And it took about 8 months, and he finally got through, and they passed a city ordinance to start the Newport Beach Lifeguard Department, 1923.
Were there any other kind of pivotal drownings or things that happened in that time that preceded that? Like there's the drowning with Dr. Frost. Was there other stuff in that time where there was a lot of drownings happening or anything?
There were other drownings that happened, yes.
Okay.
And boats were capsizing in the harbor because prior to the entrance channel, the jetties being built, it was just mayhem.
A free-for-all.
A free-for-all of boats trying to come into the harbor because the surf would just break all the way through there. And so, yes, people were actually being thrown off boats and drowning fairly often, which
right there in Corona Del Mar.
In Corona Del Mar, yeah. and Tony Duraga actually put a dory at one point because he was stationed kind of up in the bluffs in Corona Del Mar, above Pirates Cove, and he had a little observation thing where he'd do weather, and he would also be able to see. So he stationed a boat there with a guard to row out to these things as they flipped. So we actually had kind of our first non-motorized rescue boat way back in 1920. So,
in the early days when the dory boats started being used as the way to
yes.
paddle out to someone, not to have to swim out. There's no rescue tubes and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. That's all they had was the rescue dory. That's what it had. Unless it was a very in-close rescue. And again, they didn't have many skilled swimmers at that time. So it was kind of the wild, wild west in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So they got the lifeguard department. Well, the lifeguards all joined the Balboa Life-Saving Corps, which was already kind of established. And the guys in the Balboa Life-Saving Corps had already had Red Cross training. which was some first aid and not CPR, but they had first aid and they had some water rescue skills. So they had something. And so he got that group of guys and they continued to train and they started running lifeguard training each year. And these guys became better and better. And he had training techniques to have them run and swim and how to row a dory and how to paddle. And I found an article, if you heard of the Huntington Beach Plunge. It's a saltwater pool that was in Huntington Beach. It looks like it's 50 meters. I have a picture of it. And because the water was so cold in Newport during the winter when they did the tryouts, they had to go over to the Huntington Beach Plunge where the water was warmer. And they did their lifeguard training in the pool for the winter to get these guys trained. And out they came. And he created an elite corps from until 23 up until 1927. And in 1927, the Balboa Lifesaving Corps disbanded, and it just became the Newport Beach Lifeguard Department. Even though it was already sanctioned as one, it actually became one. There was nobody. It was, you're joining the Newport Beach Lifeguard Department, not the Balboa Lifesaving Corps. You're a Newport Beach Lifeguard. And he only stuck around one more year until 1928. And then he took off to become a meteorologist. He was really, really interested in that. So he left, went to the police department for 1 year. And then in 1929, it turned over to the fire department. And the first fire chief, Crocker, interestingly enough, his grandson was at the 100-year celebration. He lifeguarded in the 1950s. Mm-hmm. And oddly enough, his daughter was on my swim team at Estancia Marina.
Nice.
A weird tie-in, small world.
End, right?
Yeah.
Real quick before we go, because I want to kind of keep it chronological for the listeners as we progress through everything changing. 1925, do you want to touch on the Duke rescue? Because that was kind of right around there. We're talking
1925, right. Duke Amahoko.
So we just went to the thing last night, the event about the rescue. So,
well, the Duke that was his favorite surfing spot. In fact, he says that was some of the best surf along the coast of Southern California, if anywhere, that was the place. And
prior to the jetty being built.
Correct.
Right?
Prior
there was
to
an actual pretty good wave at Corona Del Mar.
There was a really good wave at Corona Del Mar. And even after they built the West Jetty, the East Jetty hadn't been constructed, and the surf was still very, very good in there. And so they would camp on the beach, and they would surf, and they were kind of volunteer lifeguards for Newport Beach. They would go out and help whenever they could. Well, one day, of course, the Thelma capsizes in the entrance channel because it just was treacherous. And the exact number of people that got thrown in the water.
I think it was 17 people thrown in. I think 12 rescued.
12 were rescued.
And 5 that ended up perishing.
Yeah. And Tony, the Duke, saw this, and it was big surf. It was cold water. And he gets on his paddleboard, goes out, rescues 3 people, comes back in, goes back out again, rescues another 3, comes back in, puts 2 more on. He rescues 8 people over a time of, how long in cold water and just superhuman effort on his giant, large, heavy paddleboard. And there was some other guards there too, volunteers, along with Tony Duraga was there, and he rescued a couple, and they rescued a couple more. So they rescued 12 of the 17 in pretty heroic fashion, in tough conditions. So that was a very historic rescue in Newport Beach. And that kind of set the tone for the paddleboard, as you said. People realized, those paddleboard, we don't need a big dory to launch it and everything. We can just take a paddleboard, boom, and you're out. And you're to them very quickly. So that was a huge thing in the evolution of lifeguarding. Yeah.
And at a time where, like you said, we didn't have so many people that were comfortable in the ocean.
Correct.
Here, Duke Kahanamoku is also doing that, where he's kind of brought surfing towards the U.S. to the mainland.
Yes.
Did his tour through California, right, with surfing. And now this not single, I'm sure he'd rescued people before, but this more advertised rescue, people went, we can use paddleboards to do this, like you said.
Right.
And I just think that is so cool. And that is ingrained into the Newport Beach lifeguard history.
Yes, it
is also pretty unique.
It's very unique.
That it's a very small step of separation to, the young kids who are lifeguarding today. That history is being passed on from that. They're part of that, which I think is really neat.
Right. Where it came from is very, very important, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, so let's go back. So you're saying, so they went to the fire service, Crocker, and we're kind of at that point where now it's Newport Beach Lifeguard Service, right? So let's go from there.
So so then in 1930, they had a really, we really have to get some people that are really good shape. And so the testing at the time then was like they had to swim a mile. They had to climb a 20-foot rope not using your feet. They had to run a 7-minute mile under 7-minute mile in the soft sand. I can't even fathom that. And swim a mile. They really, really put them through the paces, and you really had to be somebody to make it into the training, and those people that came out the other end.
Wasn't there something about a 100-pound barbell?
They had to lift 100 pounds straight over their head, military press. They also had to carry a 35-pound weight on the bottom for 25 yards. And, that makes me think of these surfers that surf Mavericks, and their training is holding these giant boulders and running underwater. They were doing it back in 1930 to become lifeguards.
Was that all in like a one-day test? Do you know, or was it?
It doesn't say on that when it was. It could have been.
But this was all the feet. Yeah, a mile, the barbell,
mile run,
underwater,
barbell, underwater,
soft sand mile.
Yep. It could have been done in one day.
So for all the people trying out that are complaining about their
1,000
time
meters.
swim in the pool or their 1,000 meters in the ocean, whatever.
They've got it super easy compared to what they used to do.
Think about that.
Piece of cake, right?
Yeah. That's crazy. And this was, I know, later down with state parks, they even had like height and weight restrictions before, which is crazy to think in that time. So I don't know if that was a Newport thing ever, but I know for state parks, they were like, you had to be this tall and you had to be this. And it was just a different approach, right, to where we start learning about what you need to do the job. But I think that's a cool entry.
It definitely is. And so that kind of training, evolved and kind of got the guards started. Between 40 and 45 during World War II, men are all in the service. And so they hired quite a few women during that time. There's no real record on how many or who. And they would place them like at the Balboa Pier and the Newport Pier and places where people gathered in some of the bay towers. And they took the place of the guards. It doesn't go into, I would have to believe they went through the same training as the guys did to be able to be those guards.
Mm-hmm. How early was that?
40 through 45.
40 through 45.
So during the wartime period.
And they had some of the first women that entered the service then.
Some of the first, right.
Yeah.
Tony DeRaga talks about he hired a female, and all they know is that he hired a female named Hilda, and she was part of the Balboa Life-Saving Corps. So if you want to go back.
Even before.
So that would have been somewhere between 20 and, say, 23 and 27. She was hired, Hilda.
Mm-hmm.
And then these other ladies that were hired during World War II is kind of the first two things that I've ever seen of women being in the life-saving service.
Mm-hmm. And just remind me, Tony DeRaga came from...
He was from Russia.
Right?
Right, yeah. He was from Russia. And came over here really to study meteorology. And when he set up on the cliffs above Corona del Mar... he was taking, he was looking at waves. He was forecasting the wind and the weather and everything. And what's interesting is that still goes today. I remember when the first time I went up to dispatch, this is an old PBX switchboard. We just turn the keys and plug in the things, and pretty archaic. But next to it was a weather station. They had all the wind and the tides and the water temperature and all the stuff that Tony did was still there sitting in our headquarters in 1969 when I started.
Wow.
So that got pushed forward too, this whole thing of meteorology. And I know there was they're always trying to forecast. Now you have Surfline, which they have buoys and satellites and everything. But, the guards at the time, the senior guards would simply look at the storms, look at the Chubascos down off of Mexico, and they would chart the directions they were going. And I remember many, many times the permanent staff, they'd be interviewed by the Daily Pilot. Oh, there's a giant hurricane. It's blowing 150 miles an hour. You guys, we're going to get 10-foot surf. The next day, nothing. It just didn't hit because we didn't really know how to track them and what they did. And I remember we had a class probably in the mid-'70s And a meteorologist came and he said, okay, well, look, if it's moving this direction, the wave energy comes off of the northeast quadrant stronger than it does the other direction. And so if it's pushing this direction at a certain angle, you're more than likely going to get surf. And then depending on how strong the storm is going to dictate how big the waves are going to be. And so we got better and better and better at predicting surf without any buoys or satellites or anything. And we got pretty good at it. The harder ones were the southern hemisphere storms. The winter down there, our summer, their winter storms, we could see them and certain positions, and we got better at like what direction it was coming from, which degrees. We could tell it was going to hit stronger than others. And
from what I recall, or maybe someone was telling me, this was, I mean, the way that he brought that in, that weather, I guess that makes sense, his roots as a meteorologist or studying that. But I feel like in the early days, the Newport Beach Lifeguard Service was ahead of its time in that they were forecasting and doing all this stuff at such an early
way ahead of their time, I'd say. And he even, Tony also put a weather tower up, which at the base of the wedge, before there was a wedge, he put a weather tower up and he had a flag system on it so that boaters could see. And I don't know what the flag system was, but, you know, maybe a green, yellow, red. Basically, it's safe today, it's calm. Yellow, be caution. Red, you know, don't take your boat out there. You're going to flip.
Breaking
there's
through
going to
the
be
harbor
surf,
entrance and
so
stuff.
He had a flag system that he invented, and we use those we use the flag systems today. Now they have all the, you know, this means light breeze, gale, hurricane force. We use those flag systems, and I have to believe that Tony started that. Mm-hmm. And of course, we have our flag systems on the tower, which may have come from that.
Yeah, and I think it's just so cool to see that as the early history and the progression of just the early pioneers that were thinking about these things to create safety, to create the first ways that it still resonates to the way we do things now, but we've obviously changed it and modernized it. But those early roots in how lifeguards thought about safety and prevention and all this stuff still rings true. And it's cool that, that stuff was still in the headquarters when you started. And tell me what year that was again.
I was a YEP in 1969. And of course, that was the springboard to Tryout for lifeguards the following year. So my first full year lifeguarding was 1970.
Nice.
And so it was all in its rudimentary stages as far as the weather and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it was there. And I didn't know where it came from or why they did it. But it was the weather forecasting and wave forecasting was all there, and a big thing to us because it could help with staffing if we knew it was a hot weekend, and there's a storm off Mexico. You know, we better gear up and be ready for that. Yeah. So it did give us some advance warning. Sometimes it hit, sometimes it didn't.
Sure.
But
it was something.
It was something. We had something, and we were tracking it. We had maps. We had a world map, I remember, and you could get the latitude and longitude from the Weather Service, and they would put it up. We'd track it. We'd put a dot on our world map, and it had the grid lines. We'd track it and see which way it was going, and then you could get pictures, I guess, from the National Weather Service, and it would show the storm. And we could say, well, okay, that's the quadrant. If we're more likely to get surf there. So we were doing early prognostication of storms, and we did pretty good.
Yeah.
We did pretty good.
What a cool skill to implement. And these are the little things that people don't understand about lifeguards when they say, oh, just tan and hang out at the beach.
Right.
No, there's a lot to it, right? These little things.
Exactly.
So it's cool to hear you say that. Well, so we're around, let's say 1940s now to 70. There were still some major, I feel like that was a really important time that some major things got introduced right into the lifeguard service that changed stuff. Talk to me about that before we get into when you physically started in your first person.
Right. So in 1958, it was Chief R.E. Reed. He was my first chief. And he was a military man. And he said, well, why aren't we mechanized? Why, like in the early days with Tony, guys were at they were at the fire department because they were firemen and lifeguards. They'd get a call. Well, here's your bike. Here's your metal buoy. Go ride to the rescue. 45 minutes down to Orange Street. I mean, okay, but that's what it was. So now, fast forward, and you've got Chief Reed getting Sea-Watch 1, Chris Craft boat. It was built in Costa Mesa. He ultimately got a second boat, and then he also got a third one for Corona Del Mar. And he bought 7 Willys Jeeps. They're military Jeeps, and he fixed them up to run on the sand, but they were 4-wheel drive. And all of a sudden, what typically took 45 minutes to make rescues without mechanization, with these boats and jeeps on the beach and, of course, better communications, rescue time went down to 3 minutes. And you can imagine somebody struggling in the water, 45 minutes versus 3 minutes. I'm sure the stats will show that it was amazing.
There's no need to even say that's obvious, right?
It's the obvious, right, that it was just a game changer, big time. And so that just gave us the tools to help. And, of course, right now, too, the lifeguard buoy was undergoing an evolution. The first ones that Tony used, they were as high as your waist, and they were steel with pointed ends. I don't know how many guards got hurt with those things or victims got hurt with those things, but it floated. It was hollow and it floated. They finally figured out, well, let's go to aluminum. They're lighter weight and they wouldn't hurt as much if you got hit. So they went to aluminum. And then it was in the 50s where they came up with an air tube. Closed cell foam hadn't been invented yet. So they had a Peterson tube, and it was full of air. Buddy Belshie, who worked at Newport, longtime lifeguard and training instructor, gave me one that he had. He said, "These darn things always leak, though." And they had a line attached with the strap, so that was like, they worked, and you could clip it around somebody, so it worked. But then, of course, when the closed foam cell came in, it was just, that was another game changer, because those things float. You can put, I took and strapped with my, they did. They'd put this buoy around somebody, and you could, just practicing, you could put 6 or 7 people, just hook your arm in there and float and you could float 6 or 7 people because people are basically negatively buoyant. They don't sink or rise. And with this buoy, you could float people. Now, bringing that many in at once would be Herculean, but you could hold them off until the boat got there and stuff. So those foam buoys were a huge change. We did have some initial problems with those buoys because the hook on the end that you clipped into the ring was on the end closest to the victim. Well, if you threw the person the buoy and you were going to swim them in or swim them out to the boat, you just say, hang on. And the person would hang on. Well, they're wet and they're slippery, and their hand would slip off, and the hook
all the way to the end
would go right through their hand. And it didn't happen a lot, but it happened. And so we had to think of, okay, how are we going to change this? Well, the first thing, and it was my supervisor, Larry Gibson, great innovator. He was amazing. He said, okay, well, he found a little hard plastic root beer barrel, like the root beer barrel candy. And he said, okay, we took the clip off, completely got rid of it, took the barrel. He goes, here's how you do it. You just push it through lengthwise and then turn it, and it'll hook. You can't pull it out. Okay, so I was one of the ones that went out and tested it in real situations. We practiced with it, and then real lifeguard. And you got waves crashing, and you're getting tossed around in the white water, and you're trying to get this little thing through the thing and then turn it and see. And there's another wave breaking. It's like, okay, Larry, this was a great idea. However, in practicality, it's really tough. It's not so practical. It's really tough. And I think they tried some plastic round things, but none of it worked, and they broke. So eventually someone said, just flip them. Put the rings at the end that the victim has, and put the clip at the other end. And so then when you go out, you can clip it around. And if they slip off, there's just 2 metal rings. And so that solved the problem, just switching it up.
Thanks for making it this far into the podcast. I just want to remind you guys as you're listening that the Ben Carlson Memorial Paddle is coming up, and it is a fundraising event. This year specifically, I've made a challenge through the Lifeguard Project for lifeguards to donate just $5 through the Lifeguard Project on the Mighty Cause website. You'll have the link below in the episode, and if you click, I just want to see how many lifeguards we can get to donate $5, basically the equivalent of a morning coffee, and see how much we can raise. So whether you're a lifeguard in Australia, New Zealand, the US, East Coast, West Coast, the goal is that you look at this link, send it to another lifeguard, and encourage them to donate $5. So please and thank you, check the link, donate $5, send it to another lifeguard, and let's see how much money we can raise together by just dropping in $5. And thank you so much.
And I want to say Newport's one of the only people that keeps it that way, I feel like, but I don't know 100%.
Well, of course, a lot like Huntington City and Huntington State, they have the can buoys, the plastic can buoys. which I don't prefer because my starting years, a couple in Corona del Mar, but then I moved over to Division I, and I was there with all the new groins, which had just been built from 68 to 72. And a whole new lifeguarding sequence had to be taught to work those. They're not jetties. Jetties demarcate an entrance channel. These are groins, and rock groins simply slow down sand flow. And so these rock groins had to be built.
And for those that aren't in the lifeguard or just listening, it is a small, what you would consider a small jetty, but the right
correct. It's a small jetty, right?
For some beachgoer that's just showing up to the beach in Newport, they're going to think it's jetty rocks, right?
Jetty rocks. Yeah. Well, the jetty rocks, right? And there was.
When did those get put in Newport?
So those got put in between 1968 and 1972. And they go all the way back to the house line. They go all the way back to the street. People think, oh, they're just sitting there in the water. No, they go all the way back. And to predate that, it was before 68, not sure exactly what year, probably mid to late 60s, they decided, well, let's test this theory. So the Army Corps of Engineers came down and they built 2 steel jetties, okay? And they put it at 40 and 44th Street. The reason those had to be put in is the swells were digging the beach away. Yep. And so homes were under attack. I remember going down and helping sandbag for homes where waves were breaking into people's front yards at 32nd Street. So they decided, well, we're going to test it. Let's test it here. And they did, and those steel groins are still there today. If you go down to 40 or 44th Street, they put the rocks right over them. They didn't take them out. And you can still see these rusted groins which were put there in 1968. So they're still there. It immediately stopped the sand flow, and all the homes were perfectly safe after that. But any lifeguard prior to 68 had no training, nothing to do with these. And what was happening, of course, is when a south swell or a west swell would hit these rocks, it would hit and then release out to sea. So anybody caught within a block would get swept up, and the way the water pattern, it would cut out a trench inshore. It would cut out a trench right next to the rocks, and you couldn't come in. You could stand sometimes, but you couldn't swim against it. It was too strong. Lifeguard, we couldn't swim against it. So we'd see people just offshore, but we couldn't quite get to them. Well, when we did get to them, we got to them. We couldn't pull them in this way. We had to take them out and around.
Yep.
And so Larry Gibson, who was a permanent there, was my first supervisor. He taught everybody how to make these groin rescues. Now, jetty rescues. So how he knew that or figured it out, I don't know, but he figured it out. And he said, well, here's how you have to do it. You have to get to them early. You have to clip them in. If you don't clip them in, they're going to leave because you're taking them out. So they're looking at the shore, and they're looking at 6 to 8 foot surf coming in. They don't want any part of that, even though they're. And so
the victim wants to go towards shore.
Well, they want to go to the rocks. What they'll do is they'll swim to the rocks, and now you've got another whole problem. Now you're going to have a near drowning and a first aid all in the same hand. And so he said, clip them in, period. And when you go on a jetty rescue, you take minimum 1, but I recommend 2. Because some guards on a quick rescue, they'll take no fins. They can just grab them and come in. Take 1, take 2, because you're going to be times where you get right next to the rocks and you don't have a choice. If you do it right and you do preventative, you'll get to them early. You can bring them in. Great. You get to them early, but the currents are such and the tide is such that's high, it's deep. You're going to take them around. Well, you're going to be next to those rocks sometimes, and you're going to want those fins to fend off. I guarantee you will be glad you had those fins versus putting your feet onto barnacles and mussels. You'll shred your feet. Okay, that makes sense. And he says, when the wave breaks, of course, there's water underneath the wave where it breaks. And so he says, dive as deep as you can. Your victim is going to get pulled as the white water hits them, but you'll get pulled backwards underwater and you won't hit the rocks. And I never, ever hit the rocks. And he says, dive out at an angle. Don't go straight. You need to get some distance, some clearance. So he would have us dive away from the rocks and out toward the end. Now, once you got to the end, that was a little trickier because you have surf coming in and sometimes hitting right on the rocks. Well, you can't take a victim around during that. So he says, sometimes you're going to have to stall. You're going to have to kind of backpedal until a wave breaks. And then once you get to the end, because the water then gets to the end and releases, all this water that's built up inside just goes boom.
It's going to shoot you out the other side.
It shoots you out the other side in seconds. I never hit the rocks, not once, and I made hundreds and hundreds of rescues. But the tricky ones were where, and he taught us this, he says you make your rescue, you come around, you give them a very brief education about, or not. Come up and talk to me in a little bit, but, hey, that you don't want to be anywhere on that side of the rocks. This side, notice, there's no current because it's blocked. But he taught us, he goes, you immediately run back to the base of the rocks because in that time you were out there coming around, here comes 2 more victims. And now they're right next to the rocks. You couldn't do anything about that. You can't change it, but you have to go get them. And now you're right there literally clipping them in and you could touch the rocks. You're that close. Those were scary. I always tell people, I say, rescues everywhere else on the beach, you don't have to contend with that. Well, unless you're going to shoot through the bow pier with big shore break, that would put your heart in your throat. Yeah. But, places at the point where it's really big, that's fine. You can take your time. You can get in and out and everything. But you get in a situation right next to those rock jetties, you need to be quick. You need to be good, and you better be fast. Otherwise, it could be bad for you and the victim. Yeah, and it was a very tough rescue.
It's such a great point to when rescues get presented. Obviously, this changed, and it changed the way that lifeguards trained. But nowadays, for anyone going to Newport Beach, those are still there. And this is what the lifeguards have to deal with every single time, right? This is a thing they're calculating. And when I was there taking photos for the project and stuff, I mean, it is crazy how many people are on the sand, and these guards are always, it's a rep and drill on how they're doing it. But it's like every single time they're putting themselves in real danger to get slammed on these rocks if there's any kind of swell. And all of those little factors is indicative of their training and their ability to perform that with the proper timing, the proper strength, however many victims they have, timing with the boat, communication, all that stuff, which is so technical, and people don't understand when they see the lifeguard make a rescue that there's so many calculations and things going on. And it's special to that area because I don't know very many beaches that have so many of those little mini jetties.
There's 8 of them.
Yeah. And especially, like you said, when there's a southwest that pushes all the swimmers directly into it across each of those towers. Right. So I want to make sure to not forget, because we're getting more into the modern kind of world, but one of my favorite stories and photos is that they had the lifeguards jumping off of a plane back in the day to make rescues. Talk to me about that story, because that's one of my personal favorites that you mentioned.
It was unbelievable when I first saw it. Bill Abdel gave a little talk at we were the 2 keynote speakers at the 100th anniversary, and he kind of took the Tony Duraga story and kind of developed those first years of Newport lifeguarding. And one of the slides he put up there was a biplane, seaplane that could land on the water with lifeguards sitting on the wings. And he goes on to explain that, this is kind of forward thinking, but we can get out to a rescue pretty quick with these lifeguards on the plane, not a boat, a plane, and we'll just drop them into the rescue. And there wasn't a whole lot said of how many they made or how successful, but it simply states that the program was dropped soon because of practicability. It didn't work, but they thought about it. Tony also thought about getting cannons and loading buoys into them and shooting them into the water out to the victims. Which never took flight either. But they were thinking what are some little things we can do to get the edge to help these people? Because they weren't real strong swimmers.
But there is documented evidence that lifeguards did jump off of airplane wings in Newport Beach throughout their history to make rescues. And there's a photo of them standing along in their lifeguard uniform. And that is the stuff that I think is so unique for the profession of where we've come and what we've tried to do. And lifeguarding has always been this innovative, well, let's try this, right?
Yes.
Because of the unique environment that we are forced to provide service in. And that is one of the most incredible things that I've heard, is just the fact that we jumped off the seaplane to make rescues.
That's pretty amazing and pretty far out. You wouldn't believe it if someone told you that.
Correct.
I've seen the picture and I saw the article. They did do it. So it was pretty amazing.
I would love if there's a chance that there's some kind of interview or something back in the day to get it from someone who maybe did that, but it might be too far away from you.
And fast forward now, we do helicopter training and helicopter rescues today. They train with Huntington Beach and they jump off of helicopters into the water. And so maybe that's where that idea came from the air. Get them in there.
And there is and I've done that training with the Newport guards to take photos and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, you just, the ocean and water safety in the ocean environment requests such a unique approach that we have to have all these resources available. Because I know a lot of times, and with the Huntington guards too, training with the helicopter, they will go out. I mean, even if it's something closer towards the oil platforms or someone's doing a paddle or whatever, it's quicker. Let's say the boat's not in service or the boat's doing something else. You just never know. They'll actually the Huntington City Guards staff a lifeguard at the Huntington Beach Police Department's airbase on the 4th of July, just in case something like that happens where they can drop it if there's a body that floated out or whatever situation might come up. Because guess what? As lifeguards, we have been put in those situations.
Absolutely.
And they use them a lot to spot victims from above and all that stuff. And the other thing I was thinking about, like the cannon idea to shoot the buoy out. Well, now they're trying to use drones to fly it out and drop the buoy on the victim.
There you go.
And it's still, there's still, like you said, with the early cork, Dr. Frost, the early cork flotation.
Rings.
Is it going to work? But it's something, it's indication of the way we've always innovated stuff in the lifeguard world. And so same with the drones now. Sure, but you need a victim that can be conscious enough to grab the buoy,
of course,
and not let it go if they get slammed by a wave.
Of course.
You need someone who can actually fly the drone in time, that can drop it in the right place. And so there's a lot of nuances to these things, but I just think as part of our history, as we innovate, we look back, that stuff was happening in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s.
Right. And maybe that's what keyed somebody to think about it today.
Yeah.
I know with the helicopter, of course, like say on the 4th of July or any day, I went on calls when I worked on the Harbor Department boat as a deckhand. Or your first 2 years in Corona del Mar, you had one day on the boats as a deckhand. Hobie cats would flip over in the harbor, and they'd stick the mast in the mud, and they couldn't get the thing righted, and there were people in the water. Well, the sheriffs had guns and full uniform on, so we had to go in, make the rescues, and then help them right the boat. So we did that. But we went on a couple calls where someone had a heart attack on a boat 3 miles offshore.
Exactly.
So you could easily take a helicopter, pop a guard on it, drop him right there, and you got a first aid there in minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's where, it wouldn't be that way, or the boat was broken down and someone had a problem, a stroke or something. So there's definitely applicable uses of a guard on a helicopter for sure.
Yeah.
And of course I have to throw then in my helicopter rescue, which was
Please do.
One of my top memorable rescues is I was on the Harbor Department boat with Jerry McGraw, Harbor Patrolman, and we got a call of a major first aid broken femur on the Ladder Rock down south of Corona del Mar. So we went over to the little finger jetty at Corona del Mar, came out of the harbor. We picked up John Blower, who was a supervisor over at the time. He hopped on with me, and he took us down to Ladder Rock. Well, the guy had gone out at low tide to go fishing, and now it's high tide. He can't get off the other way. Well, he can't really move anyway, but they couldn't get him off by land. And there was about a 5-foot swell running, so they couldn't get him off by boat. Well, we got to take him up. Well, there's no Coast Guard helicopter available, to lower a basket down, which is the way it can be done. So now I go back to training where they taught us how to get on and off the rocks. You ride the swell up, hang on, wait a minute, water goes down, you scurry up a little bit more, wave comes in, you ride it up. And in training, you have a wetsuit on and you have gloves and you have all that. We had nothing. We had to just make this happen.
Yep.
But you go back to your training, which always remember your training, because when you get in a pinch, it's going to happen. Tell the young guards a valuable piece of information that if you do it right and you take seriously your training, that all came flooding back. Oh, that's right. This is the way they taught us to do it. We got up there, we got on the rock, we got to the guy, we kind of stabilized him, calmed him down. We didn't have any first aid equipment on us, but we kind of stabilized his leg, calmed him down, because you can go into shock more and die from that versus the broken leg. And then it's like, okay, Jerry McGraw called for the Newport One. Well, Newport One doesn't land on the water. Newport One just has 2 metal skids on it. Ladder Rock is not flat. It slants up and then there's a back wall to it. So the helicopter pilot, I found out later, he landed on Ladder Rock, but he didn't land it. He put one skid on the rock. He kept the other skid in the air and he had to keep it on full power because otherwise he'd tip over and crash. He goes, it's the hardest thing a helicopter pilot has to do is to land on an angle and keep the thing powered on and stay level.
Yep.
Looking at this back rock too. And now and the rock kind of went up like this. It went up and that's where the guy was. So we're putting this guy, they had a basket attached to the helicopter. So we took the Stokes litter and we put it down and we're putting this guy in and strapping him down. And it seemed to me, if I had just thrown my arm in the air, that I would have hit the blade. Now it was a little higher than that, but under full power, you're just getting the blast of this thing. And it was loud and it was
not to mention waves
scary.
are crashing.
Waves are crashing. It's like, and Jerry McGraw took pictures of it. He happened to have his camera. So I've got a picture of me and John Blauer carrying this guy to the helicopter, teetering on this rock. And it was pretty, and to my knowledge, I don't know that that's been done in Newport ever since.
Yeah. And I love that. I do remember that photo from the presentation. And this is once again what lifeguards are tasked with doing. And right, it's another old day. Yes, we as some say, and I use air quotes and going, just hanging out on the beach. And there are days where you're totally bored. And there are days where you're completely, no one's in the water.
Right.
Maybe nothing's going to happen. Sure. But then you immediately get thrust into a situation like that, what you just described, a rescue like that. Like you said, that could be the thing that makes your entire career the way. Mm-hmm. And for that gentleman, that was the only option. It
was the only option, right?
For getting him out of that situation. Who else to make that extrication, right? If you didn't have the other resources available, like you said, Coast Guard, all this stuff. And this is what lifeguards are constantly tasked to do. And why I think it's so incredible to talk about and learn from these things. And what an immense amount of experience you can gather from that. Then when you go in and you taught the lifeguards afterwards, for them to be able to hear that from you, hey, this is what I experienced. Here's how I navigated it. And we just, it lifts up our whole profession as we pass that knowledge on.
Right. And I think it's the procedural and the critical thinking skills, because you're going to use that all the time, day in and day out, of these critical thinking skills. And on a rescue like that just thrust on you, it's like, okay, think about this. What's the best way to do this? And if you have good critical thinking skills, you can kind of figure things out. And that's part of your training. Of course, that puts another, arrow in your quiver of how to do things and stay calm under pressure, because you might have freaked out, waves hitting rocks, helicopter, whoa, no, just take it step by step and you can do this. And so you tell young guards, yes, of course. Again, go back, listen to your training, use your critical thinking skills, and you'll be fine. Yeah, absolutely. And you will be.
So more specifically to your career then, when you started in 1970, what a cool time to be a lifeguard too, because it was like the technology and some of the stuff was catching up a little bit.
Yes.
But it was still very much, we were talking earlier before we started recording that there's no sunscreen in that time. There's no shaded towers. We were just kind of going and making it up and learning new things. And what we didn't know, but we had a lot of technology that had moved the profession forward.
Yes.
Talk to me about that, those early days. What was it like, and what do you remember? And what were some other big highlights, not just rescues like you just described, but just generally for what lifeguards today might not realize, and how that's maybe changed or how it hasn't changed in the early days of lifeguarding for you?
My first 2 years were in Corona del Mar. Luckily, I finished in the top 10 in my lifeguard training class. And typically, the guards past that had to go on the bay. And I missed the bay. Corona del Mar, some people could say is a bay, but it gets surf. And it gets big surf. So I got put in Corona del Mar. And in 1970, there was no sunscreen. And we had open bucket towers. Now, they did have roofed towers over on the main beach. So they did have those. I think they were built in early 60s. I have to look back. But they had shade. We had no shade. And we used to just bake in the sun. We didn't know any different. We also wore cheap sunglasses. We all had these aviator sunglasses. They weren't polarized. They weren't really that dark. And so that's all we knew. In 1978, an Irvine company, Allegheny, I think, produced Eclipse, which was the first we'd even heard of sunscreen. Oh, yeah, it can damage your skin big time. And so we started using sunscreen with PABA. Well, only to find out, I think 20 years ago, that PABA is not a good ingredient. They shouldn't have been using it, but it was the first. And so they used it. It was all they had. So we used that. They also said you need to get some polarized sunglasses. And boy, that was a game changer, because as you know, when you look at the water, it just cuts the glare. And from about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock on, especially in West Newport, you're looking into the sun.
Directly in
the sun. And that cut the glare so much, you could actually make out rescues. Now, sometimes it was so bright, you had to call the tower next to you and say, hey, to my right, your left, what do you see? Oh, there's 2, go.
Yeah.
And they would just tell you, go. And I'm going too,
Yeah.
So the early Corona del Mar, those 2 things transpired where we had to make amends, I suppose. We had all kinds of weird stuff over there. We'd have people falling off the cliffs over by Pirates Cove. So we had first aids doing that. Lost kids all the time. I mean, all the time. Kids were just outmatched. There were so many people on that beach that, and so you had to get really good at getting as much information out of the child as you could. Of course, calling it in, all the specifications, you had to get it all right. Of course, then if you had the lost kid, you didn't have the kid, you had the parent who was freaking out completely. You had to calm them down. Calm. We'll find them. We always find them. We've never lost one. They're not lies, but you want to do what you can always. And I tell guards in the situation, sometimes you might need to tell a little white lie. And it's only for the benefit of the patient, not because you want to lie. We had a guy that had a surfboard hit his calf and opened it up, literally opened up his calf. And, to look at it, and we said, don't look at it. No, you're fine. You're going to be fine. And we started trying to put butterflies on it. And it was like they pop, pop, pop. They just came off because it was such a big cut. Okay. So we got the biggest abdominal pads we had and stuffed them in there, wrapped it with Coban or gauze. Yeah. He went to the hospital and he ended up taking 400 stitches. Oh, but we never let him see it.
Sure.
So, and I said, you're going to be fine. It's a cut, but you're going to be fine. It's not that big. That was a lie. Okay. But if I would have said, oh yeah, take a look at this thing, your whole calf is opened up, he would have passed out, gone into shock, and we lose him. Yeah. So I said, there's certain situations where you need to calm and give them some information, but not all the information that may send them over the edge. So that happened. But Corona del Mar was also, like I said, it was fun and interesting because we got 1 day with the harbor department, and we would ride around as a deckhand. So I got some experience doing that. Which was really fun, jumping in the water and saving people. People would run over their swim lines, and we'd have to get in with a knife and go down and cut them out and do things like that. So different things. But in 1972, the next Easter, so I guess it would have been 73, or 71 to 72, so Easter, I said, hey, I'm available for Easter week, which wasn't spring break. It was Easter break, but spring break. And I said, I'd like to work over in Division 1. So they put me at 56th Street. I was I would have been a third-year guard. 56th Street's it's one of the towers, it's the marquee tower. I mean, there's the wedge. Nothing's going to touch the wedge. But 56th Street, long rock jetty and big surf there. And it was running about probably 5 to 6 feet. And I said, okay, just go back to what Larry taught, what he taught. And I made like 8 rescues that day. Hooked him up, brought him around, came back in, and Gibson, supervisor, said, you're working for me this summer. I go, well, I work in Corona del Mar. He says, no, you're working for me. Because at the beginning of the summer, all the supervisors sit down and they kind of do staffing. Some people have asked for transfers. Some people, want to move to a different division just for change of pace. But Larry said, no, Carpenter is mine, period. That's it.
And how were the divisions broken down back in that day too? Just give me a once over.
Yeah, you have Division 1, which went to the River Jetty to the Newport Pier. Okay. Division 2 went Newport Pier to the Wedge. Division 3 was Corona del Mar. And Division 4 was the boats.
So it's more or less the same today.
Same today,
yeah,
right.
Okay, so they've kept that.
Right,
cool.
They've kept that.
Before I forget, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I just remembered the piece with, was it during this time frame, the surfboard license?
Yes.
And all, right, because we hadn't talked about we talked about when the jetty kind of groins got put in, but maybe that's a good thing to talk about, the surfboard licenses, Blackball, and the wedge getting put in.
Wow.
Remind me exactly when that all kind of transpired.
So the surfboard license started in 1963.
63.
The city figured, hey, there's a whole bunch of people in the water. Let's make a little revenue off of this. So they said $3, you'll get a license. You put it on the bottom of your board. And then someone said, well, how are you going to check it? You could catch some on the beach, but then there'd be a whole bunch in the water. So the lifeguards literally took a PA and said, all right, surfers, license check. And they had to get off their board, flip the board upside down to show they had a license. And if they didn't have a license, they had to paddle in and go buy your license.
I love that detail so much. Yeah, there's a surfing license in Newport Beach. So just tacked onto the bottom of your board.
Yeah, it was a sticker. It was a sticker.
Just like you would on a boat or something.
Yep, just a sticker like CF numbers. You stick it on. It looked pretty large. It was probably a foot 9 inches wide by 6 inches. It was pretty good size. So you could see it. If they held the board up, you could see the
But of course,
license.
Who's going to check? The lifeguards, right?
Oh, we're the only ones. I mean, the city's not going to check.
Especially if a surfer's in the water.
They told us you call them out and show the board and they'd get them out. Sometimes they wouldn't come out and you had to go get them. And, but that went until 1968 and it wasn't feasible.
Yeah,
just can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it anymore. There was the progression. Well, then you talk about Blackball. Blackball, I believe, was instituted in 1964 because there was so many, the Gidget movies and Beach Blanket Bingo, surfing and the Beach Boys. Surfing became huge. It just exploded. And you could look out on days from the Newport Pier and you could see a solid group of surfers as far as the eye could see. Just solid. Like you could jump from board to board to board. There was that many. Of course, we had a lot of really interesting first aids because of all of that and the collisions. Mm-hmm. But so they had to figure out, and Jake Jacobson, who was one of our chiefs back then, he said, we have to make some zones. We have to do this because people are just getting hit left and right.
With big, heavy old school boards.
Right.
That were made.
That's right. So he said, okay, let's make this Blackball flag. We'll put them on the towers from 12 to 4. And so from 12 to 4, surfers had to get out and the swimmers had the beach. And it separated them. It worked really, really well. But in the early 70s, there was some tweaking we had to do because what I found, and I was in that area, is that at 12 o'clock or 4 o'clock, the surfers would just go in the water because the back of the tower said 12 to 4. Now, it said subject to Blackball, but they didn't read that part. They just read 12 to 4 and their eyes saw the 4. So 4 o'clock, they'd click, and they're out in the water, and there's still swimmers out in the water. So I said, well, we have to have a way to kind of maybe get rid of the hours on the back of the tower because at 24th Street or 22nd Street down by the Newport Pier, it's 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning and there's 1 million people in the water. Well, it doesn't close until 12. I can go out there and go surfing. No, you can't. You will hit somebody. So I said, the hours don't work. I said, we have to go by just the flag system. So I told my supervisor and he agreed. He goes, yeah, we need to. And so they changed all the signs in Newport and they read, Blackball, subject to Blackball. They just got rid of the 12 to 4. That helped so much because it gave us leverage. Now it's like, it's 9 o'clock Sunday morning. Hey, surfers, the area is going to be closing to surfing and we could do it. Then we had to go one step further. And we found it worked. I found it worked really well. I said, let's take the Blackball flag and put it in the window, let's say at 48th Street. So if you walk up to you're looking at the water, there's a Blackball at 44. If you look up, you'll see the Blackball sitting in the window at 48. Clearly, there's a Blackball on either side of you. You can't go in. If you walked up on the other side of 48, you'd look on the tower, you wouldn't see anything. And you look down at 52, you don't see anything. This area is open. Mm. And so, but that wasn't very visible. So I remember driving into headquarters. I said, let's find some plywood. We cut out a square. We put 2 holes in it and we got a couple of nails. And we said, let's just tack this up to the side. Oh, and we sprayed it yellow and then took a black paint can, hollowed it out and stuck it on there. And now we had a Blackball board. Cool. I didn't invent the Blackball flag, but I invented the board that separated the towers. And we stuck it up there and nailed it into the tower. And later, of course, we were able to hang it. And now today they've got really fancy plastic ones that go into a slot and everything. So, but what would happen is, and we had to educate the surfers. As you say, education is everything. It's key. You have to educate. And we told the surfers, look, you don't want to hurt anybody. You don't want to get sued and you don't want to hurt anyone. Well, here's what we'll do is at 3:45, we will say, swimmers between 48 and 52, we're going to open this area to surfing. So, because before that, people would say, well, just leave the flag in at 48. Well, yeah, but if you walk up on that side, it's closed, of course. But on this side, it appears it's still closed because there's a flag there,
Yep.
but 52, there's no flag. So wait a minute, which one is it? So we would say swimmers, and this always worked. It never didn't work. We'd say swimmers were going to open this to surfing. Well, they all got out. I said, all you have to do is come into the beach and move down the other side of the rocks. We never put them in an area that was dangerous. If there was a south swell, we'd say you have to move all the way down to the next groin and get in there. And the surfers would wait on the beach. They didn't just bolt into the water, and it could be after 4. They wouldn't bolt. They would wait for us to do this because if there was too many people, we just didn't do it. But once it got manageable, we could get the swimmers in, move them over, put the plaque up, and you could see the surfers. They would line up along the berm, and the second the guard went to reach up to pull the flag, there was 50 guys going in the water. Before, they would just go in the water. Now what do? The blackball's up, and they're in the water. Well, if you just say, okay, fine, forget it, they'll do it every day.
Yeah.
So we had to then close the area until they all got out, then reopen it.
Yeah.
And it was a big mess. But once we got that blackball plaque working, no problems. And of course, I tried to, you pass this information on to the next group because here's what works. And I always tell, you say, well, what's good information for a young guard? Talk to the older guards. They're the ones that have been through it. They know. They've done it. And this is what works. It worked. And they've gone through some different evolutions on number of people in the water. If there's 25 people in the water, you can't open it to, it's really crummy and overcast today. So we're going to open it. So they've gone to some different things. But the bottom line is you want to separate the swimmers and surfers and you're golden.
Exactly.
And
especially on days we know exactly what happens if you don't, right?
You don't
When
know.
it's super
There's
busy.
first aids and crazy.
Talk to me about the wedge.
So the wedge, the wedge is so particular in itself. And I know back in the early days, there was no tower there. There was no tower. There was a pole with a phone number on it. I remember the phone number. It said OR, 7331. It was that long ago. On the sign, that's what it says. This was probably in the 60s. And then it started getting a little more popular. People would come to the wedge and they said, well, we're catch-22. If we put a tower here, people will come. If we don't put a tower here, we'll get less people. But then if someone gets in trouble, now we're in trouble. So it was decided to put a wedge tower in. And of course, I kind of used little white lies too with that because someone would come down with an air mattress and one fin and a t-shirt on. They say, which way to the wedge? I absolutely felt terrible doing this. I said, well, it's just kind of down this area right over here, and send them to a safe area. Because to tell them to go to the wedge and if they didn't get intercepted by somebody else, would be telling them the wrong thing. So, but it of course is a place that spawned Project Wipeout. If you want to dive into that a little bit,
Absolutely.
I think that started in 78 or 9. Jack Skinner, who was a doctor at Hogue, noticed that during the summers preceding, or the summers prior to that, they were getting neck and back injuries at the wedge left and right. It was so popular. People were down there and they were getting like 4 or 5 neck and back injuries a day. And he says, what's going on here? This can't happen. Why is this happening? So he decided to take it upon himself to start Project Wipeout. And Project Wipeout was to gather not just Newport guards, but all guards in Southern California and have a symposium on neck and back injuries, educating the public to what could potentially happen and best practices. What do you do if that does happen? Because prior to that, there weren't a lot of neck and back injuries because there weren't many people there. But all of a sudden, we got some, sure, we did. But now they were becoming commonplace. And so they had to have a mechanism to educate the public. And we talk about that. Educating the public is the name of the game. They made T-shirts for us that said Project Wipeout, and it had a guy upside down, skeleton figure, and his head hitting the bottom. And we wore those. We wore them on the beach. And people go, what's that? Oh, it's Project Wipeout. It's to inform people not to go head first and go over the falls, and make sure you have your hands in front of you and don't go to areas where it's, shore break. And so they would bring in guest speakers, and then it just evolved. I mean, it's still going on. I think you were a guest speaker at one of the last ones. They had all kinds of doctors come in. Sometimes it was too technical. It's what they did at the hospital for us being on the beach. But it was still very interesting because, once we take a neck and back injury to the hospital, or once they load them in the paramedics, what happens after that? We don't know. We don't know. And then they went into the whole deal of what they do on that end. So here again, we think, someone came down to the beach, that had a neck and back injury. and they say, oh, thank you. And then you realize everything that had to go on for that person to come walking back down here was done by those doctors and therapists and physical therapy. And it's like, there's a lot more to it. There's a huge amount to it. You learn that through these things. They talked about, cold water drowning. They talked about best practices for first aid and extrication. And you learned so much. And then, of course, then we impart it to the public. And I think, I believe that the neck and back injuries just went way down, way, way, way down. And of course, a lot of that is, preventatives. We talk about, any given summer, there might be, 3,000 rescues or 6,000, but we had 43,000 preventatives. Well, the preventative is you see someone with a water wonder or not dressed right for the situation. They're heading out toward big surf or rips, and you intercept them before they get there. That's really the name of the game. It's not reaction. It's preventative action, and you have to get to them before they get into trouble. And the more times we can do that, and the more times we get down and educate them, and tell young guard, get out of your tower. You can call the towers either side of you and say, hey, watch my water. You're still watching it, but you've got double coverage, and you can go down or just stand at the base of your tower and always face the water, because that's always face the water, period. You'll never turn your back to the water. You talk to them in front of you, and you tell them what you need to tell them. Educate them as much as you possibly can. And they call them, I think, personal contacts now, but they're basically preventatives. And
this is the catch-22 of our profession, where if we go as lifeguards and work our butt off all day and prevent all these things from happening and educate people and talk to them, which, like you're saying, is the majority of the job if you're doing it right. People show up to the beach and they leave happy and nothing happens.
Right.
And this is where I think a huge problem for the perception of lifeguards is, oh, you guys just do nothing all day. No, I'm exhausted. I talked to 1,000 people today about all this stuff. And the data and statistics is that the numbers, let's say, for C-spine injuries has gone down since we've implemented this, and we did the Blackball flag here and all this stuff, all these preventative measures to ensure that people go to the beach, have a great day, and leave happy. And we have nothing to show for it in a way, right?
Right.
You don't need to do that rescue. That's the last resort, is going in because someone's really in a dangerous situation, or emergently it comes about that way. And that's the problem, that if people don't sit with that information, they don't understand that we're actually working our tail off
all day
long just to stop the thing from happening. Whereas other things are more reactive, right? Other professions.
Reactive, right. And it's a matter too of the 50 times you ran down to the water. You didn't make a rescue. You didn't touch anybody, but there was someone just on the border of going out. And that's something I kind of want to touch on, is people just don't realize the trouble or what the ocean can cause. They just don't realize it. If you went to a parent and said, hey, would you take your kid and throw him into a tank with a hungry great white? They'd say, what, you crazy? Are you off your rocker? Would you go stand on the edge of a 40-story building and just stand there on a windy day? Are you crazy? What are you talking about? Why would you put your kid waist-deep water where there's a riptide? Because you can go from having the time of your life to fighting for your life, including you and if you're not strong swimmers. They don't realize it. They don't see it. They don't understand what a rip can do. And, if it weren't for us making 250,000 rescues over the course of the history of the lifeguard department, how many of those people wouldn't be here? I mean, it's just, you have to educate. And how we do that, and I know you talked about how to do that, maybe there's some QR codes in the back of towers that people can glean some information, maybe some short little video clips where they can click on it because they all have their phones at the beach. Oh, that's a rip, and that's how, and it could even be specific to that area. Or 56th Street.
You're exactly taking the words out of my mouth.
56th Street. Oh, that side current comes in there and goes around there. Oh, but if I go just on the other side, it's safe. They don't technically have to talk to me. They could, but they can see it. So that's a fantastic. I heard you say that, and that's a fantastic idea. We got to get people to do it. And
as a progression of the modernization of our profession, right?
Yes.
But here's the thing that hasn't progressed from the 1920s to now, let's say, is people's ability to swim in the ocean. Yes, it's become more confident. They're recreating more. There's more people surfing and that kind of stuff. It has improved, but the general global awareness on water and safety has not made the same leaps and bounds in understanding when you have your one lifeguard in a tower with 1,000 people around your area, man, you are it. You are that safety net of not just education and prevention, but then reaction as well if it needs to come. So it's just, I sit with that subject all the time and think about how to make it better. But it's just so important, and it's cool hearing it from someone like yourself, saying the exact same thing we've been saying for 100 years now, right? From the beginnings and the early times that you mentioned to right now, the same problems persist and similar answers are there. We just need to implement them a little bit better. And it's just, I think it speaks, people hear me on the podcast or whatever, getting on my little soapbox about it, but it's cool to hear it from people like yourself with a wealth of experience to it and having seen all that. In your time in your lifeguard career, are there any calls that really, besides you mentioned the helicopter rescue, any other calls or situations or things that still stick with you as kind of pivotal through your time and your experience?
Yes, there's a couple. One was a pier rescue. One helicopter rescue in 50 years, one pier rescue in 50 years. I was sitting up dispatching, and only the lieutenant was in the building with me. It was middle of the day, and someone comes running in to dispatch. I'm the only one sitting there. Said, someone's drowning off the pier. Okay. Logan, get out of here. I've got a rescue. Because, at that point, it's like, well, I quickly glanced and I didn't see a unit within a few blocks of the pier. So it's like, it's me. So Logan came in and dispatched. I grabbed the buoy and I ran out. I followed the person, ran out, looked over the side. There's this guy with Levi's on, and he's literally keeping his nose above water. He's ready to go down. He's within seconds of probably drowning. And I had to make a quick decision. I said, okay, I've got to jump. And I looked down, I could see the bottom. If I jump and break my legs, I'm not going to be any help to him. Okay. If I run back down to the end of the pier, back across the sand and back out to the water, I said, could be under by then. Okay. Think, John, we're going to do it. You got to jump, but you got to go to deeper water. Again, back to my training. And I can't remember how many years it had been after training, but it had been a few years. And so I got out there. I couldn't see the bottom, and he was probably 20 yards, 30 yards still there, but I ran out past him, kept my eye on him. And I thought, okay, I'd heard about a banana scoop. I had not practiced one. I hadn't, but I remembered guards talking about it where, the second you hit the water with your feet, you kick them out and you kind of hit on your butt. Yeah, there's an angle. It was smacked pretty hard, but you went it in an angle, and I just went, I hope this works. And I jumped, and the second my feet hit, I kicked them up, hit my butt, and my feet skidded along the bottom. As I bananaed in, they went ping, ping, ping along the bottom. And I stopped for a split second, and I moved my ankles like, they're not broken. I'm good. But it was close. It was really close. It was scary. Sure. And I swam over to the guy and got him and brought him in, and he was for sure a drowning victim. No question about it. And the other one was, and this is something that parents really need to watch. It kind of goes along with educating your kids and yourself to what the potential dangers are. And I think we do a pretty good job here in Southern California. We go out to all the schools and we educate kids in rescue techniques, CPR, first aid, all that. Southern California. What about the people coming from San Bernardino and Riverside? Do they get educated on beach awareness? I don't believe so. I could be wrong, but I don't believe so.
Probably less than what they should, yeah.
And then people outside that far, they come from Barstow, they come from Vegas. We get a lot of people from all over the country.
The whole world.
Do they know anything about the beach? And the answer most of the time is no, they don't. Mm-hmm. They just do not. So we have to do a better job of getting that word out to past the people that live within 10 miles of the beach. We have to do that. It could be through the media or through the internet or whatever. We have to do that. But I was driving about 6:30 with my partner. We were on night patrol. Goes from 2 to 10. We come around 44th Street. No guards are in the towers now. It's after 6. And we see about a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and he's standing right next to the rocks. The tide had come in, and he's getting pulled out along the jetty. And it's like, okay, actually, and we both ended up going in because it's like guards out, rescue. And I stepped out, and he stepped out, and 44. And we grab the kid and we pull him in. And I immediately turn around. Where's the parent? And I said, where's your parents? Are you down here alone? Yes. Where are they? And he points. Well, there's nobody on the beach. Where are they? Well, they're in the house there on the corner. I said, they're in the house? I was mad. I was really mad, but I said, okay, keep your cool. And we took the kid, put him in the Jeep, drove up to the house, knocked on the door. The parents answered, and they said, yes, can we help you? I said, I don't want to sugarcoat this, but your kid just about drowned. Why aren't you out there watching him? Well, we told him he could go right out in front of the house here and play on the beach. Well, he was in the water, and he was getting pulled out and probably would have drowned if we hadn't come around the corner at that particular time. You can't be away from your kid when he's around water, period. You can't. And I kind of scolded him because I was mad. This kid could have died. And, my wife goes, well, you were there at the right time and right place, and that was meant to be. Mm-hmm. So, educating the public again to potential dangers they just don't see or do things. You hear pool parties all the time. It happens every year. A kid drowns in a pool because people weren't watching him. Well, I thought you were watching him. Well, I thought you were watching him. Water and non-swimmers is just lethal. It's just lethal. And people, we need to get that across to them because it doesn't happen all the time. And to tie into that, which education, you're always a guard for life. You never stop watching the water. You never stop looking at things. My wife, Liz, and I were walking. We take, 4 and 5 mile walks down the beach. We live in Huntington. And we're walking along the boardwalk up by the cliffs. It was actually during the camping area. And we see this sand flying out of the ground. Immediately, my spidey senses go up because in the early 70s, 2 kids in Newport tunneled into the berm where the waves come up. They form kind of a hill. And these kids had tunneled in. And of course, as soon as they tried to come up, the dry sand above just collapsed and they had their hands in front of them. They both died. And it was like, I was like, what?
Sand entrapment is one of the least spoken about dangers at the beach. And I've got a photo. I don't know if I showed you the photo I posted with the sand, but and sorry to interrupt, but 1970 is still happening, right? And that's one of the least touched pieces on public education. And it's a sneaker because no one sees it. We're trained to watch the water and we can't watch all the sand. But anyway.
Right. Well, so
I'm on a soapbox about
that. No,
that. And
so we're walking and I see the sand flying and I stop and I said, I'm an off-duty Newport Beach lifeguard. A little white lie. Ex-retired lifeguard. Yeah. This sounded better. And I said, you can't dig that hole any deeper. I said, it could be dangerous. The sand collapses on you. And I got about 20, 30 feet away and I'm thinking, and there's a whole bunch of parents back kind of partying right there on the other side in their campers and everything. And I said, I need to go back and talk to the parents. I need to tell them too. Normally, I help them fill it in, although this was pretty wide, not super deep, but deep enough that he bent over and he was gone. And my wife Liz looks up and she goes, hey, there's a unit right there at the tower, kind of halfway, a couple blocks away. Perfect. So I ran out there and I told the guy, I said, listen, I said, when, he was giving a break, the guard was in the water, he was watching the water. And I told him, at the end of the pathway right there, there's a hole, the guy's digging it. It's pretty deep. And I think they typically tunnel. That's what they do. And I said, you go over there and tell me. Oh yeah, absolutely. He goes, last week we had a girl bury herself, except for some reason she had a towel. The way he explained it, she kind of had a towel and she had her hands and she was able to have an airspace.
Air pocket, yeah.
Well, they had to dig her out because it collapsed on her and she was fine. And he said he goes, so nothing happened. It was never reported. It didn't make the news because
they didn't die.
If she would have died, it would have been splashed all over the place. But just another, the lifeguards just did their job and there was no problem there. No, there was a huge problem there.
A near
death, right?
Yeah,
but it doesn't make the news.
People don't realize because they think it comes off as I'm just digging a hole at the beach.
Right. That's all it is.
Just like when you're standing at the edge of the water. Oh, but I love the example you used. Would you let your kids stand at the edge of a 40-foot building on the cliff, right? Like whatever it is,
right? With a great white.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Hey,
digging
in
a hole.
Split second, digging a hole can change from you breathing to you not breathing, right. And then your brain cells die within 4 to 6 minutes.
And it's not easy to dig someone out. It takes time to do that. It's not as easy.
Yeah. There's a famous video of the sand entrapment with thousands of people on the beach.
58th
Newport
Street?
Beach Lifeguard. I believe that's the one that's on YouTube and stuff.
58th Street.
And the fire department, the public is helping. The lifeguards are there.
The city had the trucks that were sucking sand away from the area.
But all that still, it takes 30 minutes minimum, 45 minutes, 1 hour.
It took 30 some odd minutes.
Yeah.
And actually I was on that call. I was down at the Bow Pier and they told me to roll with a videographer, but this was kind of, it was later in the call. And that was successful because the fire department had trained the lifeguards to not just, our first instinct early was to just throw the sand up the side. Well, it would keep coming down because it's at a certain angle. It'll slide back down and you basically are doing nothing. It just keeps coming down. That you had to have rings. And so you had to push the sand up and then the next group had to push it away and the next group pushed it even further. So you get this flat, broad area and they got people helping. They put them on the second outer rings and they were pushing all the sand away. And it was, I think, 30 minutes. I think, and they saved them because of the training and because doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. So, but people, they don't see that. And when those two kids were buried, and it was like, that was shocking to me. I know they had told us in training, you have 3 levels of responsibility. Your primary responsibility is the water in front of you. Your secondary responsibility is all the way down to the next tower. Because you never know when that guard is on a rescue. If you didn't catch it right away and you see someone down there and not your water, that's your rescue.
It's all your water.
It's all your water. That's right.
If you can see it, it's your water.
That's right. So I said there's a primary, a secondary, and the tertiary is you need to know everything that's going on behind you. Now, that doesn't mean turn around and, spend 5 minutes checking out everything, but you glance back. You need to know what's going on. You see sand flying up. You see a hole being dug. That could be a death just as easily as the person in front of you that drowns. Yep. Suffocation is going to happen.
Same mechanism.
So I really push that with the secondary or the tertiary, checking and making sure. And it sometimes I'll be walking down the beach and I'll see a deep hole way back by the boardwalk and no one stopped him. It's like, well, they haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. And I'll usually go up and again, tell the guard and just advise them. And, but most of the time they catch it, but sometimes they don't. And my thing, I literally through my whole career, is telling people to stop digging holes. And I would make them fill them in. I literally would. Yeah, it's not just because we knew the first couple of times, hey, fill it in. Okay, we'll do it when we're done. We'd come back an hour later and the hole's deeper and still there. Yeah, I'm tired. It took me 3 hours to dig it out. I'm not going to fill it in. So I literally went up and down the beach telling people to fill their holes in. Don't do this. I had one, which was really scary. There was a kid standing up. All I saw was his head. We're in the unit. And I pulled far away, like 20 feet away and stopped, got out. I said, hey, we're going to fill that in right now. He goes, well, I got to get my buddy. What do you mean your buddy? Well, he had tunneled over this way and there was another hole there, which I didn't even see. I just saw the guy digging here. The other kid had gone in the hole and was in the tunnel. And I went, oh my God, I hope your buddy's still alive there. And if I had driven 10 feet further, I would have collapsed the tunnel because it was right in front of me. But I stopped short because I saw him and it was angled over. And sure enough, went over to that hole, and yelled, and the kid came crawling out backwards. This was just two more deaths waiting to happen. Just was going to happen. And we stopped it. And, when I became the Ep coordinator and the Cadet coordinator, I'd run up and down the beach with my Eps and Cadets, and we would do training. Every single hole we saw. Mm-hmm. And I got the kids, the Eps and the Cadets. Mr. Carpenter, there's a hole over there. Yeah. They knew.
All you need is a little bit of awareness. Yes. And then you realize the impact.
That's a problem. Yeah. And so that got passed, and that was kind of my thing, is to stop sand entrapment. And I have to believe the number of times that happened that saved some lives and didn't even realize.
I'll show you the photo I got at Newport. It was a year or so ago with just this the guy's in a hole, and they literally on the wall of the hole, because of how deep and big it is. This kid's probably 5 or 6 feet tall. It says the hole. They wrote into the wall of it. It's just, you can't ask for a better photo about sand entrapment. But I'll show you afterwards. Yeah. But in your career, towards this part where you went through, you did a lot of training, you spent an incredible amount of time dedicated to lifeguarding. Kind of more, let's call it philosophical, or towards the end, where did you find yourself? Here's someone who's done a career as a lifeguard. A lot of people I'm sure you've ran into it where people, you tell them, oh yeah, I was a lifeguard or whatever for my career. What? Like they probably have a different reaction to it. Where do you find yourself in the tail end of the career when you were giving back and training or even in retirement, looking back on that? What did it do for you? Where does it sit with you that was the thing that you chose to do and where you are now with your life?
Well, initially, I had guarded for 5 or 6 years, and then it's like, this is amazing. This is an amazing job. I found my calling. As Confucius said, find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yep.
Well, we work. Trust me, we work. But it's like, how can I keep doing this? Because at that time, a lot of 5th and 6th year guards, they were done. They had to go find real jobs. You can't survive on just summer work.
For sure.
And they were leaving. And it's like, it was really sad. And they were really bummed. I could see it. And I was like, what can I do? And my mom had talked to me again earlier about, well, why don't you become a teacher? And I thought, well, yeah, I should become a teacher. And I went back, got my teaching credential, and I became a teacher. And I got a job at Estancia High School, also coaching water polo and swimming, which I would send a lot of kids to the training and do that. And actually, Boyd Mickley and John Moore, 2 of my early proteges at Estancia High School swimmers, ended up being permanent staff down in Newport. So that's like a really good feeling to have that happen. And with the cadet program that ran from 95 to 2010, 6 of the current permanent lifeguards were my cadets.
Awesome.
So, I can't ask for anything more than that. And it is that giving back. And because I was able to get into teaching, I could guard forever. And it's like, this is amazing. This is an amazing job that I can work in the summertime, switch gears, and by the way, help people. You really felt you were making a difference. And when you go rescue someone and they're out of breath, they fall and hit the ground, you knew they were probably seconds to minutes away from dying. And a lot of exhaustion cases. And so being able to help these people was just a gratifying feeling, just super gratifying. Fixing someone up on a first aid, stabilizing a neck and back injury that you probably kept from being paralyzed the rest of your life. I want to do this forever. This is amazing. And then with teaching, wow, I get to impart knowledge to kids over here too. So I guess my whole life has been just to impart knowledge and give back what I know to kids that don't know. And so that's how I was able, once I got to age, year 40, 45, it's like, I'm going 50 years. There's no reason not to. And I said, I would always guard 50 years as long as I was capable to do it. I said, if it became where I wasn't capable, then it would be dumb. Even though I'm just doing the cadets and doing training with the kids, every day I walked around with a buoy and fins. I was responsible if I saw something to make a rescue, which of course you would do anyway, whether you were told or not to. So you had to stay in top physical shape the whole time. So it ended up, I was able to make it to 50 years with a job or 2 jobs, actually 4 jobs, the coaching, the water polo, the swimming, the lifeguarding, and the teaching. I would recommend to anyone. And I would tell anyone that would listen, I said, most guards are going to quit after 5 years. I said, and that in itself creates a turnover of guards every 5 years where, you look at a group and like, I've been out 5 years now and you don't recognize anyone. It's all new. And so all the training has to go on again and pass on again. But there's a number of guards that, like me, taught. And so we're around for 10, 15, 50 years, And the continuity, I think, is really important. So
it's huge.
As people are looking at jobs going, yeah, I'm going to go work for this chemical company, 9 to 5, white tie dye. Why not become a teacher? Why not become a teacher? You can work the lifeguarding every year. You make a pretty good salary as a starting teacher. You make pretty good money down here. And you throw coaching on top of it. There's a stipend. I said, you can live very, very, very well on that. And you're going to love what you do. I highly recommend it to anyone I could talk to of guards. And a lot of them took it, So for me, it was a very fulfilling career. And of course, as it got to year 50, it's like, okay, I made it. I got it to 50. Well, I went to the junior guard meeting in January of 2020. Okay, year 51. And then COVID hit. And they were talking about not running the junior guard program that summer because of COVID. They couldn't have all the kids together. Well, that would mean putting all the instructors for the junior guards back into ops, which would be me. And I thought, okay, I've done 50 years. Do I want to go back into ops? and, do that. And I'm going to be 66. And Father Time always wins. Father Time bats 1,000. Father Time always wins. And you have to recognize that. And it's like, okay. And I noticed probably a few years before that, first, second gear work, but third and fourth, not as strong as when I was 18. It's just something that happens. But you can still get the job done. And that's why I still did it. And I thought, well, okay. And I said, you know what? I really want to go out on top. I want to go out with a perfectly clean record, have done a great job. And the worst thing, and I've seen it happen, is where, hey, Carp, come on in here. You know what? We want to kind of make a change. We want to go in a different direction. In other words, we want you out of here.
Yeah.
And I never, ever wanted to hear that. Now, I kept myself in top physical shape. I ran everywhere. Cadets, I said, cadets don't walk. Yeps don't walk. We ran everywhere we went. And I stayed in shape, and I did everything they did, swam, paddled, pier jumped, everything. So I stayed in shape. So they couldn't say anything. In fact, I was in good a shape as anyone. Not quite as fast, of course. But so I said, let's add all that up and just like, do I need to go 51, 52 years? I said, no. Let's call it at 50, go out on top, clean record. And I did. I said, I announced my retirement, which was really hard. You see athletes who've done their whole career and they're calling it a day and there's tears in their eyes. And there was in mine. It was like, This has been my life, 50 years. But you're still a lifeguard for life. And I still spot rescues and I still tell people to fill in their holes and, but super rewarding. And I push it on anyone that wants to do it that way. And what you can get out of it is just amazing. You get out of it way more than, it's just, you get so much out of it and you're just helping people left and right.
Yeah. Well said.
Super rewarding career.
Well said. And that's just it, right? Having that continuity and having, people like yourself to be able to pass that on is rare now, right? We have, like you said, that turnover and let alone, I mean, I don't know how much the pay has changed from when you started to now versus the expenses of things in the society. I mean, there's just all these other layers to making that profession happen. And, I just think it speaks volumes for people like yourself to be able to speak this to hopefully that 16-year-old lifeguard that's listening right now that goes, oh, okay, maybe there is a path there. Maybe I do. Oh yeah, they're talking. I mean, you and I are having the same conversation that I've had with lots of guards in different age ranges, whether they're retired or just started or whatever. The same things apply and the same things that we get out of the profession. And I see an immense value in that. That's why I'm doing this with the project and stuff. And I think this is why I want to have people like yourself on the podcast and sharing the stories, sharing the history, the photos, the collection of stuff that you have for these other guards to see and get inspired. Could be the spark that changes that they end up sticking and going down that path versus, like you said, going to that 9 to 5 that pays a little more, has some other perks. But there's just something about lifeguarding that, and you've presented it very well through all of your stories here, that relates to life itself, right? And I'm biased. I've done that. I'm still doing it.
Right.
But I think that there's just something to it that's just a little more unique than a lot of other professions. And it just brings people close. You have skills that you use in your life that you can help others. And like you said, you're a lifeguard for life. When you walk to the beach, I guarantee if I saw you walking down the beach, you'd be saying, hey, you shouldn't do that. Hey, this over here.
It's exactly what I do.
You can't turn it off.
You can't. And as we walked down and got closer to the Huntington Pier, there was about a 6-foot swell running. And as we're walking, I said, well, let's walk out on the pier. And before we even got there, I said, and Liz, you check out that rip there. I just do it instinctively because it's like, see the brown water and it's pulling out there. And of course, then it's like, is there anybody in it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You just see those things and you're constantly looking at that. And that's, I think, what we need to educate, to get people to do, is to constantly be looking and evaluating and what the situation is. And the more we can do that, again, proactively, we're just going to save so many people. So it's just a matter of getting that out there.
And I'd love to be on this part of the progress of lifeguarding and just hearing your stories and where it started. And there's a lot of things that have changed, but there's a lot of things that stay the same, right? And I think it's cool to be part of that and see where we can take it next, in the modern world and all this technology we have now. How can we apply that to make the profession better and continue that progress forward, because some of a lot of the same things ring through time, same problems, but our new approach can be the thing that changes that for the better or for the worse. But
because when people ask me, like, you can go through all these changes, but at the root, people come to the beach, people go in the water, they get in trouble, we rescue them. I mean, that hasn't changed since day one, but there's been a lot of changes in between of how we do it and how we affect it and the equipment. I was just thinking another couple things with the drone, because it is the new technologies. It's during the winter, and someone calls up and says, hey, there's this first aid or that going on in Corona del Mar, or someone in the water or whatever. Well, it's going to take a unit X amount of time. Drone, pop it in the air. I don't know how fast they are, but they're pretty fast. It could be over there in a few minutes. With a great camera, it could locate exactly where the problem is, because a lot of times you get to an area and then the guard has to kind of, if there's not a crowd, he's got to find where, or she has to find where it is. Hey, it's at Little Corona. It's 20 feet to the south of the tower, up, back, oh, perfect. But you can spot it and have that information instantaneously. And like you said, drones can carry an amazing amount of weight now. And I have no reason not to believe that they can't make it, get a drone with 2 buoys on it or rings. And someone calls in, there's 3 kids out on a rip at Orange Street. Well, the nearest unit may take, 5-7 minutes to get there. And even though, if they're in the white water and getting turned around, that's one thing. But if they're pushed out past where the waves are breaking, you drop a couple of flotation devices, that's better than nothing. That absolutely is better than nothing. And you just might save them. And it's the best you could do in that situation. I'd love to see that. And of course, I remember years ago when they were having all the juvenile great whites show up at Seal Beach, they had a drone operator there, I believe. And that was their job all day, is just to sit there and scan for great whites and, close the beach or not close the beach and everything. It's like, there are definitely uses for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm hoping that technology catches on, and who knows what's going on in the future. I know we've gone away from landline telephones to now it's all wireless. Lines would break and rust, and the beach cleaners would hit them and snap them, and no communication. So that's kind of change, which is kind of cool too.
No, it's cool to see how far it's all really come along.
It has.
It just kind of wrapping up here. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you, or that you want to share, or another whatever story or concept or something that you can think of in closing? Well,
you talked about 3 historical pictures I know, which was kind of cool. For a long time, I was talking to people about the River Jetty Pier. And everyone, of course, scratched their head and said, there is no River Jetty Pier. Yeah, there was one, 1969, 70, 71. We put a guard on the pier with a buoy and a first aid kit
at the north end,
and nothing
River
else at the river jetties. There was a pier there. It was an outfall for the sewage plant there, water treatment plant, and they had to have that. And so they put this pier up temporarily, and they put metal siding on it on both sides, so the swell couldn't interfere with the pipe. Well, when south swells came in, it did reverse of the wedge. It came off those metal sheets and came back, and it created a peak. And the water would then swirl around in there, because as the south swell comes here, it kind of pushes away. This water pushed into the pier, and it stayed there. It was scary to body surf in there because you get swirled around. But people just, sure, Carp, there's a pier there. And they'd ask their parents. No, they're not old enough. Ask your grandparents. And 1 or 2 said, yeah, they remember it, but not really. And I looked high and low for a picture. I finally went to the Orange County Sanitation Department and said, do you have a picture of that pier that was built? Oh, yeah, we got one in the archives. I got it. And I brought it in and showed everybody. I said, see, it's real. There really is a pier. And another pier picture.
So a reverse wedge at the north end of Newport at the river jetties where there used to be a pier.
Yep. There was a
documented
peak.
In photographic form.
I body surfed it. I had my little water wander out there, and I was you could surf that reflecting wave off and get a pretty good ride out of it. But it was scary area when it was big. Surfers loved it. Sure. They really loved it. There's also a picture of the Newport Pier, which is kind of cool, with a stairway. One of the pictures in there, it shows Don Burns, I think, and Eller when they're talking to a training class right at the base of the pier, and the picture has a stairway that goes up to the pier. And I showed that to people. They go, "What? There was a stairway?" Like, no, yeah, there was. It was early 70s, but there was a stairway, which was kind of a cool picture. Those are historical photos, which I really liked, and always looking for more. And as far as my history of Newport, There was Patricia Dominique wrote a little paper on some of the lifeguarding history that went right through 69. Well, I started in 69, and I always thought, well, maybe I'll do the next 50 years. And as it ended up, when the centennial, but I didn't really put a whole lot into it. I just thought, well, maybe I should someday. When the centennial came up and they said, would you be a keynote speaker at the 100? Of course I will. Well, can you put together a slideshow? So I put together the slideshow. And then it's like, there really needs to be a history of Newport. There's stuff on the police and there's stuff on the fire. There's nothing on the lifeguard department. So now I have a 350 slide presentation on all the changes that have come about and some of the historical perspectives of what's happened with lifeguarding in Newport Beach. I do have pictures. Once I got into it deep, I do have pictures that I pulled off the internet, and I'm trying to track down and get photo credits for everybody. I'm also looking at the fair use of it because it is educational, it's historical, and it's nonprofit, which maybe I can just put it on. But I'm researching all that. I want to make sure it's all, and there's just more research to do. Yeah. I've been working with Kai Weissner from Huntington Beach. Yeah. In fact, he took me to Santa Ana and we looked up some old historic photos and he helped me.
He did the book on.
He did a book on it.
Huntington City lifeguards. Yeah.
So I'm going to continue with that, and I eventually will publish it. It will be seen, and it's
good
for people to see. And again, share my knowledge and share the history of Newport Beach where it didn't exist before.
Well, so that the younger generations now can have access to it and see that they're part of it, right? Yes. And it's all changing. And I love. This is just one aspect of getting that information out there the more we can. And I think it's up to whoever ends up liking it or thinking about it or being inspired by it or not, or they just learn some fun facts and they go, oh, did you know this, and that? And so I just think everyone has their own, approach to it. Sure. And it's just important to do it. And so thanks for taking that on. Cause I know there's a lot of people that maybe you may never get to see or talk to about it, but I know that they'll either through listening or hopefully seeing the book one day and that kind of stuff. It's going to make a huge impact,
into the general community too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'd like to end with probably the best advice I could give to a new guard would be to have an outstanding positive attitude. Because if you give me a young guard that has a positive attitude and is motivated to do well, it's worth gold. I mean, it's just worth gold. I mean, you have to go to work every day. People want to be around you if you're positive and if you're happy. If you've done something wrong, you'll take criticism and you'll work with it. And that's one of the best things you can do is be professional. Nobody wants to have someone come up and do a first aid on them. Your patch is half falling off and you've got a hole in your shirt and your hair's not combed. It doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. So, being professional, I think, is just huge. And I've always done that. I've always strived my 50 years to be professional in everything I do. No screwing around, no doing this, no doing that, where you might have fun flipping shells at somebody on the beach or doing something where the public's looking over going, okay, that's not very professional. Or anything that would involve, someone going, hey, that's not very professional. You want to inspire confidence in people, and being professional is the way to do it. I know it helped me. I became a seasonal supervisor. Actually, my first years in Division I, for 5 years, I was on the beach, and the guy that was the assistant supervisor quit. He had to go take a 9-to-5 job. And Larry Gibson, my supervisor, said, go buy a blue jacket. You're my new assistant supervisor. Oh, okay. So I was halfway in the division. And then 3 years later, he said, this Division I's too big. We're going to cut it in half. You're going to be supervisor from 48th Street to the Newport Pier, and I'll take north of that. Supervisor, yeah, you're going to do the report cards. You're going to do the discipline. You're going to do the scheduling. It's your division. As a seasonal, that had never been done. And to my knowledge, has never been done since. You don't give a seasonal a full division. But because I was professional, because I had the great attitude, that's what it got. That's why I got it. And I'll always believe that. Mm-hmm. So if I can tell people to be positive, have a great attitude, be professional, it's going to take you where you want to go.
Absolutely. Especially in a profession that allows us, we're still thinking about how to do things. We're still innovating. And if you're the one that has that idea and you've approached it professionally, you've shown your credibility through your whole point, people will give you that respect and that immense responsibility that lifeguarding forces anyway, because we're still on the cutting edge of making things happen and do it. And that, I love what you said about that. Those qualities equal success in that. Yep. A career that demands that unique approach to the environment, the rescue process, even the technicalities. Just like in the early days when here's this Russian guy that came and was going to be a meteorologist, saw a need and applied that immense motivation to make this stuff happen to right now, like what you're saying, have a clean uniform, be motivated, go forward. And that can be applied to any aspect of any job, really, right? But more so here, especially too. Yeah.
And to add one more thing to that is to be a low maintenance employee. I think I got winter work too there, a weekend winter work, which I told them I didn't even want in the interview. I said, I'll be a substitute. And the next day they said, Carp, you got the winter work. You get to work every weekend all winter. It's like, oh, okay. No, take it. That's a great thing. It's a stepping stone. It's a good thing for your resume. Anyway, you want to do it. And I have to believe again, I didn't even ask for it. They said, no, we want you. Because again, the attitude, the professionalism. And I remember on my first day of winter work, the guy said, you know what, go out there and just, because there was no book, there was no blueprint on what to do, just go out and lifeguard, be the professional you are. And I figured it out. And he said, and just be a low maintenance employee. They don't want to have to supervise you. They hired you for winter work because they know.
They trust you.
They trust me. Yeah. You got to be trustworthy to do exactly what you're supposed to do. And I did. And I tell people that I said, you want to be your supervisor at the end of the summer should say, oh, Steve, yeah, I can't really think a whole lot. He didn't do anything wrong. Like there's nothing to put in his report card. Yeah. He just went out there every day and he did the job and he did it right and he did it with the right attitude and he did it positively. Or Susie did a great job all summer, never had to discipline them for uniform or being late or, how important it is to be on time, especially with lifeguarding. You get to a 10 o'clock tower at 10:05 and someone is drowned in between. You're not going to feel very good the rest of your life. And being on time is so critical in everything you do. But having that, be the low maintenance. You don't want your supervisor to ever have to tell you anything. You already know it. And if you don't know it, you're going to go find out. Mm-hmm. So I found that those attributes served me really, really well for 50 years and will serve anyone well. So I highly recommend it.
And what you said when you said, I got to do the winter work, right? Just that detail and the way you say it is your approach to it, right? That I'm picking up. It's, we are working as a lifeguard really is a privileged job at all the things you can be doing in the world, all the different countries and stuff. I mean, working as a lifeguard in California, in the US for that matter, where it is a paid profession, where you don't have to just volunteer and you can get paid to do this in some areas as a career and sustain yourself in limited zones. You have to recognize you get to do this.
Yes.
It's not that it's given to you.
You got to earn it.
You have to earn it and you get to do it. And every day you got to remind yourself that it's a privilege to be up there doing that job because it is a luxury. It is a luxurious job. You're working at the beach and not very many people fit in that niche of having the ability to perform that work. So if you show up and you waste that for someone else that could have gotten into training or done it, leave it, go somewhere else. Right. Don't waste it here because it's not what the public deserves. It's not what your coworkers who you need to trust with your life deserve.
Right.
Come in and be the best that you can because you're getting paid to do a pretty incredible thing in a pretty incredible place.
Pretty incredible job. It is amazing. I respect that job and respect everything about it and the people that do it, whether it's any emergency service, police, fire, lifeguard, EMT, anyone that helps the public like that, you just, hats off to them and the noble professions. But you have to work at it and you got to keep educating. You got to keep improving yourself and improving the job and you put your 2 cents in and then someone builds on that and so on and so forth. And pretty soon it becomes better and better and better and better.
Absolutely.
And that's I think, a solid goal for our profession.
Mm-hmm. John, I think that's a great spot to end. I couldn't have said it better myself. So thanks so much for coming in and recording this. And I'm just stoked that people are going to be able to sit and, listen to this conversation and hopefully they'll get something out of it. So thanks so much for all your work and everything you've done and an amazing career too.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Jessica.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Lifeguard Project Podcast and generally in supporting the podcast altogether. As a reminder, if you haven't clicked that link yet to donate $5 for the Ben Carlson Memorial Paddle and sent it to another lifeguard, please do so. It's just a social experiment to see how much impact we can make if everyone pitches in their drop in the bucket. moving forward as future projects come up and media and coming together to sign resolutions or whatever it is that we do to advocate for lifeguards, I want to see the impact we can make here first. So once again, please consider donating your morning coffee to the Ben Carlson Foundation. If you've been following along with the Instagram, the YouTube, or the podcast, they're the ones that are helping make this happen. Thanks again, as always, for listening. See you in the next one.